Welcome, everyone, to the Meet the Authors Christmas Extravaganza here with Headline Books. We are so happy to have Independent Author of the Year, Lauren Hudson, with us today. And I'm going to hand it over to Lauren.
Hi guys, thanks for coming today. I'm so excited to talk to you all about my book series. Just to give a little background about the Ascension Series, it is a young adult fantasy trilogy that talks about triplets that can see the past, present, and future. It just dawned on me that I should have put a picture of the cover of the book on this slide, but you'll see it throughout the presentation, so keep an eye out for it. So a little bit about me. Aside from being an author, I am a junior at the University of Kentucky. I'm studying neuroscience and biology, looking to go to med school. I also have a Spanish minor. This is me and my 3 roommates at the UK game last year. So I love being a student, but one of the other things I love is writing. So I'm the author of 2 sets of series, the Ascension Series, which is what I'll be talking about right now, and then the Students Leading America series, which is a series that I write with my dad, which I will be talking about today at 5 p.m. If you're interested, you can go to Headline Books and sign up for that event at 5. I also, as a pre-med, work on medical journal articles. My research is specifically about cancer literacy and cancer in Appalachia, Kentucky. So that's another passion of mine. In my free time, I like to read, write, as I've mentioned, do puzzles, spend time with friends. I am a huge fan of Star Wars, Harry Potter, Disney, or one of my favorite authors, Sarah J. Maas. So if you like any of those things, feel free to reach out to me and we can talk about them, because I will talk about them for hours if someone lets me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my writing journey today, and I'll start with how I kind of got into writing. For as long as I can remember, I've had a passion for reading. I was usually the kid on the playground who would read the book completely shamelessly. I loved it. I always had a love for other, that should say, worlds. So like fantasy books, Magic Tree House, Warriors, which is this book over here on the left, this cat series. I don't know if anyone else has read it. My longtime best friend and roommate, who is on this call right now, will remember how obsessed I was with these books. And so I just loved it. I love the idea of other worlds and diving into another world and learning about how they live. I really kind of fell in love with writing after I had been reading for a long time. Pretty much in about 6th or 7th grade, I had an assignment where my teacher asked me to write a short story, and I wrote a 30-page novella. And she read the whole thing and was like, this has potential here. And so that's when I thought, maybe I do like writing. Maybe I should pursue it further. So a little bit about how I came up with the idea about the Ascension. It was just an inconsequential night, kind of a night like any other. That's how these things always seem to begin when you're not expecting them to. I was on a FaceTime call with a friend back in 6th grade, right around the time I got into writing, and the idea just came to me. I said, how cool would it be if someone could see the past, the present, and the future? And so I worked with him the entire night, developing the plot, thinking about the characters and their names and what they were going to do throughout the story. And that night, when I was 11, I wrote the first chapter of The Ascension. I didn't know at the time that it was going to be called The Ascension. I didn't know that it would even be published, but that night I wrote the first chapter. But then I kind of went another direction. I didn't immediately continue writing The Ascension. Instead, I just put it down, didn't think about it too much. But over the years, my parents had noticed my passion for reading and writing, and my parents knew that I loved to write. And so when I was in 7th grade, my dad asked if I wanted to work on a book with him. And we'll talk about this more at the 5 p.m. session when I talk with him about our books. But the idea behind it is to combine fiction sections with nonfiction teaching points to teach students about American principles. And so he had the experience as a business lawyer. He knew all about capitalism, which is what this first book is about, and I had the talent. So I love to write fiction sections, so I wrote the fiction sections to go along with his teaching points. So the press, we pushed, after Our Best Tomorrow was released, we pushed the message to the media, and the community really, really rallied around us. This was something I was not expecting when I started writing, local televisions and radio stations began to ask us to come to their studios. This is me waiting in the green room for 55 KRC in Cincinnati. It was like 5 a.m. It was really early. And so I was mostly asleep in the green room, and this picture below was me 10 minutes later, still looking relatively tired, but ready to talk about my books and about my passion. We also went to New York to do some national television. So we were on John Stossel, we were on Fox and Friends, which was a surreal experience for me as a 8th grader to be on national television. I definitely had a lot of prepping for that. My dad helped a lot, and it was very scary, but it was ultimately a memory I'll never forget. The book received awards all around the world, all around the country, so I got to travel, which was really cool. But the press wasn't always everything it seemed to be. As an 8th grader, it was very stressful, and I remember there were times when I was just thinking, oh my gosh, all I want to do is play soccer, all I want to do is hang out with my friends. But then I had to go do this local television, which in the end I ended up loving. But as an 8th grader, it was a lot. It was stressful. So following the press with Our Best Tomorrow, my dad asked me to write another book with him. But I said, I will do that, but not just yet. I have another idea. And so that's when I picked the Ascension back up. I had put it down for nearly 3 years, but when I was 14 years old, I started writing again. I reread the first chapter and realized that it was horrible. This is a horrible first chapter. So I pretty much rewrote it, and I started building writing into my daily schedule. So I would, I would write out my planner for the day, and I would talk about how I had to play soccer and how I had to do schoolwork. And I also had to write, so I just kind of built it into my schedule. I had my first bout of writer's block when I was working through the Ascension, as most authors do. When I was writing it, I had the beginning of the story and I had the end of the story, but I didn't know what was going to happen in the middle. I had no idea what was going to happen in the middle of the book. And I was actually on a hike in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We were hiking up in the mountains, and I had this moment where I just kind of was looking out at the sky and the pretty landscape and thought, this is it. I know what's going to happen. And so the first book is actually set mostly in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I had that inspiration that helped me get over my bout of writer's block. And when I was 15, we sent the Ascension to the editor. I thought that it was God's gift to literature. I thought it was perfect, but then the editor sent it back with a heavy amount of edits. And at first I was kind of like, well, what do you mean it needs edit? It's perfect. Of course it was not perfect. It needed a lot of work. And in hindsight, it was so much better because of it. It helped me to develop the Asterian world more, and it was just essential that we went through those edits, even though it was painful at times. And then on October 9th, 2016, which was when this picture was taken, the Ascension was released at Joseph Beth in Crespi Hills. This is actually a picture of me and my whole soccer team. I missed practice because I had this book signing, and so everyone came after practice to my book signing to say hi and to buy books, and that was really sweet of them to rally around me like that. So the deception. I had always known that I wanted to make the Ascension a series. As someone who loves fantasy novels, I'm really into series. I love getting to know characters over the span of several books, 3, 4, 5, however long it might be. And so right after the Ascension was released and people, really started to kind of take up the book, they were really interested in it, I began working on the Deception immediately after a lot of signings for the Ascension. And I quickly realized that writing a sequel was a lot harder than writing the first book. When you're writing the first book in a series, you have no limitations. You can write whatever you want. You don't have to make sure it aligns with anything that you've written before. You can do whatever you want. But with the sequel, there are certain things that are already set into stone. You've already created the world, you've already created the characters, and you have to make sure that everything in your sequel aligns with what you wrote in that first book. So in an attempt to make sure that everything aligned, I tried to be very diligent with my planning for the story. I don't tend to be too much of an outliner. I just kind of jump right into the story and let it kind of develop as I go along. I tried to be more diligent with the deception. Whether or not I succeeded, I don't know. But the story definitely came along, and I felt the characters begin to grow as I grew. So when I started writing the book, I was, as I mentioned, about 14 years old, and my characters had just turned 15. And at this point in time, when I was writing the deception, I was 17, and I felt the characters begin to grow and mature as my writing was beginning to grow and mature. So I kind of took a little bit of a hiatus from the Ascension series to come back and work on the Students Leading America series with my dad. I began writing It Can Be Done, which taught students American ideals by telling the story of my grandparents. I quickly realized that it was difficult to write about someone else's life, which I thought it would be easier because, the story is already kind of laid out for you. But similar to how your story has to align with the sequel, it also has to align with the person's life. So I had to talk to my grandparents a lot, which I loved. I had to really get their feedback on the story and to see how well it aligned with their life, which is funny. I actually ended up changing a lot of it to make the story more interesting. But, it was rewarding in its own right, telling their story while also teaching what we like to believe is an extremely important point for students. So circling back around to the redemption, this is the final book in the Ascension series. Over here in the corner, completing the anchor story was all kinds of emotional. At this point in time, I was 19 years old. I had been writing this story since I had started it when I was 11, and I had been writing it seriously since I was 14. So I had really grown up with these characters, and I found so many laughs with them. I kind of considered them my friends. Like I knew them almost just as well as I knew myself. And I wasn't really quite ready to let them go, but I had to because I had to let the story tell itself. I know that this isn't Harry Potter. This story isn't going to go on for 7 books. I had to let them go. I had to let the story tell itself. And so I remember finishing the very last page of the redemption and feeling a little bit of relief because, it was my longest book in the series. It took a while to write. And so I was satisfied, but also sad. I think I definitely shed a tear when I wrote that last sentence. And then the release of the final book brought a bunch of unexpected complications. The book was supposed to be released in May. And as you can imagine, that was kind of thrown off by COVID, just like literally everything else has been thrown off by COVID. We had some printing issues. We didn't actually get correct copies of the book until August. And then by that point in time, the summer was over and, I was starting back up my junior year at UK. And then we had signing issues. Usually after the release of every book, I would go do a bunch of signings in, Kentucky, Indiana, Cincinnati, kind of around where I live. But all the bookstores were closed. And small bookstores, weren't accepting authors with social distancing. And so I had to figure out a way to sell this book and to get the word out, even in the midst of a pandemic. So that's when we started doing, Zoom into books, which is really, really fun since I really missed getting to talk about my series and about my passion. So these are one of my favorite events, and I'm really glad we get to do this during this time. So what's next? Next, I would like to graduate from undergrad at UK and attend medical school. This picture over on the left is currently what school looks like half the time. Me on my laptop attending online class with the big book that I wish I was reading instead of being in class, and my kitty right next to me. So hopefully next semester classes look a little more normal and I can graduate in a year and then attend medical school. I would like to continue writing. I always get this question, when are you going to write your next story? What's next for you in terms of literature? And for a while, I kind of thought, I'll write once I become a doctor. Right now, I'm going to put writing on hold. But then I had an idea that I got kind of excited about. And so as of right now, I have an idea in the works. Don't have anything on paper, nothing set in stone, but I definitely have something that could turn into a series at one point in time when I have some more time. So I'm going to go through a few tips about writing. If anyone in the Zoom room is interested in writing, here's some tips that I realized while I was writing the Ascension series. First, don't rush the process. One of the things that really surprised me when I was writing is how long the whole process took. I would finish the book and then I would think, oh my gosh, it's done. Now it'll be published in 3 weeks, a month. But I very quickly realized that it doesn't happen that quickly. Editing is one of the most important parts of writing a story. And then after that, once the book is as perfect as you think you can get it, it still takes a while to, get it published, to get the copies, to have the cover art correct. So it's definitely a process and it's something that can't be rushed. Kind of on the similar vein, don't get caught up in your pride. Like I said, I thought the Ascension was perfect when I sent it in and was a little bit heartbroken when it came back with so many edits, but I said it was so much better because of it, and I truly mean that. And although editing can be painful and long and a little bit sad, it's so, so important to make your story better. So power through, take the criticism to heart, make your story better because of it. Another point, don't let the story drag. I really felt this with the redemption because I didn't want the story to end. I didn't want to let go of the anchor triplets, but I had to know when it was time to end the story. I had to let the story tell itself and then let go. Another point, don't forget your why. Why did you start writing? Why did you start reading? What do you love about it? When you are in the harder parts of writing a series, whether it's writer's block or editing or waiting on the publisher, not everything is going to be fun, but you have to remember why you're doing it. For me, I love to write. I have a story to tell, both through the anchor triplets and through my stories as an author. And I want to share that with readers. I want to share my passion and my story with readers and other writers so they can improve, so they can follow their dreams too. So find your why and remember it. And then my last point, and this one is so, so important, don't ever stop reading. When I was writing, especially The Deception, I kind of fell away from reading and I got caught up in school and I got caught up in, spending time with friends, which I love doing, but I didn't read as much. And then I eventually got back into reading and realized that reading is the single best way to improve your writing skills. So it's also a big passion of mine. So once I fell back into reading, I felt like the redemption came more naturally because I was reading, because I was improving my writing skills by simply doing something that I love. So if you're looking for a Christmas gift for a young reader or writer in your life, definitely check out The Ascension. I am going to stop screen sharing real quick so I can read a little excerpt. Hopefully, if you're on the fence about whether or not this book would be right for the reader or writer in your life, hopefully this excerpt will answer that for you. Let me get it pulled up. So this is an excerpt from The Ascension. It is actually the very beginning of the book. So I hope you like it just as much as I do. The stately grandfather clock chimed from the bottom floor of the small mansion, ringing not one, not two, but 12 times. The multiple dings signaled the beginning of a new day. However, this would not be a typical day for Desdemona Anchor. Today marked the start of a very new year of life for the now 15-year-old beauty. Desdemona smiled to herself and lightly sang happy birthday under her breath. Pulling the fluffy purple comforter up to her chin, she yawned, closed her eyes, wanting to celebrate a good night's sleep before her surprise birthday celebration the following afternoon. Desdemona's mom always believed 15 marked the start of a new life for her only daughter. Why 15? Desdemona didn't know. She always wondered why 15 mattered rather than the classic 16, but she never argued with her soccer mom mother. After all, whenever an argument occurred in the Anchor household, her mom brought out the classic, "I'm your mom, do what I say" verse. Desdemona would simply stop talking. There we go. Wanting to bicker with the only person she could completely trust in her life. Speaking of Stacy Anchor, a voice drifted through the drywall, reaching Desdemona's ears as muffled waves of sound. Stacy talked excitedly to her best friend about the surprise party she was planning for her sweet baby Mona tomorrow and how excited she was going to be. As Desdemona began to laugh at her mom's giddiness about her birthday, her world began to twist and swirl and turn. Body shivering, eyes fluttering, something hauled her out of the bedroom and into a memory not her own. Beeping noises pierced silence. Darkness enveloped her, except for a large overhead light shining onto a screaming woman writhing in a hospital bed. She scrambled and ran, rushing around the dark, blurry room, frantically searching for something. Pulling open dark drawers, she ran her hands all around the tables and desks until she felt a sharp pain in her index finger. Desdemona picked up the syringe by the sharp needle. She wiped the blood drawn from her finger on the desk, wincing slightly. Sprinting towards the bedside, she handed the syringe to a man wearing a white lab coat and holding 3 babies in her arms. The doctor passed the children to her. After he injected the struggling woman, she felt still. For the smallest moment, everything became silent. Everything stopped. No one moved, not an inch. Finally, the doctor let out a large sigh and the door cracked open from across the room. Has she been silenced? A woman, gray-haired, although not more than 60, poked her head in and asked. "Yes, Mom," Desdemona heard herself saying. "You may enter." "Which child would you like?" the doctor asked the woman referred to as Mom. The woman walked over to where Desdemona struggled with 3 sleeping babies and inspected each of them closely. "Whatever will you name her?" A lingering hesitation engulfed the room in silence. "Desdemona. I will name her Desdemona." So that was the very beginning of the Ascension. I'm gonna share my screen real quick again. So that was the start of the Ascension. If you're interested in learning why Desdemona was seeing this vision or who these babies were, who the woman was in the hospital bed, definitely check out the Ascension. The second book is the Deception, and the third is the Redemption. They can all be purchased on Headline Books website, and I would love to get the chance to sign them. And then I will also be taking questions now. So I know we have some questions in the chat. Okay, so the first question says, "Can you give us a hint about the next fiction book you will write? How were you inspired to go in that direction?" Well, I don't have all the kinks worked out about the next fiction book I will write, but I was inspired actually by a place that I went. Over the summer, I went to North Carolina and we went to this, I want to say it was like a park. It was called Brook Green Gardens and it was beautiful. These, massive gardens with statues and art. And they were actually doing a light show at night. And it was an artist had put together like light displays and they had put it around the park. And I was just mesmerized by the way the light worked with the gardens and with the art. And I thought, there might be something here. And this idea just came to me and I spent the whole night kind of working it out in my head and figuring out where I might want the story to go. So that's a little hint into it. I'm not going to share anything else, but who knows? Maybe you'll get to read it one day. So this next one says, "You are 20 years old and you've edited a book on cancer, written medical journal articles, written more than 50 business and community columns, and authored or co-authored 5 books with 3 more nonfiction books in the hopper ready for next publication. What's next?" Medical school. I'm hoping to get into medical school, take the MCAT next year, get in, probably continue working on some of my medical journal stuff, and maybe start writing that next fiction book. Then the next question says, "You wrote a play that was produced and you have written film scripts. The scripts won awards across the country. How is it different to write plays and scripts?" That's a good question. And there is a big difference. This is another difference that I hadn't considered until I started actually working on plays and scripts. But the biggest difference is that you can, with a book, as an author, you can kind of inner monologue with one of the characters or however many characters you'd like, and you can let the reader into their thoughts. But with a script, everything has to be said either through dialogue, facial expressions, hand expressions. You can't have the viewer go into the reader's mind like you can in a book. So you have to find that balance of letting the reader know what's going on without being too direct with it. Okay, so the next question says, is your next story going to be science fiction? Will you keep a target audience of young adults or branch out to a larger or different audience? I think I'd like to keep a similar genre of like science fiction fantasy. I'm just obsessed with it. It's basically all of the books I read. I don't mean to pigeonhole myself into one genre, but I really love it. So I do think I'll keep a similar genre, and I love speaking to young adults about reading and writing. So I think I'd like to stay in this genre. This next question says, what do you do in your free time to relax or decompress? Good question. As a type A personality and an Enneagram 1, I definitely struggle to relax. I was really struggling with it earlier in college, and that's actually why I fell back into reading, because it's something I try to do every night before I go to bed, even if it's just reading 5 or 10 pages. It helps me relax, it helps me decompress. I also like to hang out with my roommates and with our friends. We have a great group of friends that are very good about reminding me to relax and reminding me to take some time away from school and writing and everything. This next question says, do you feel your ebooks give readers the same experience as the original paper copy? This is a good question. I think it's pretty subjective, honestly. I went through a phase where I had a Kindle and I read all my books on ebook, and I really liked it. But as of recently, I've gotten back into reading paper copy books, and I do prefer paper copy because I like to have the physical book. I think the quality of the story is the same whether you read it on ebook or paper copy, but it's really just whatever you prefer. They're both available. The next question says, do you plan on writing anything related to your experiences in medical school? Good question. I actually have a book on my to-read list about a doctor in medical school. So I am definitely going to read that. I would think I don't know. I think it depends on if I have any stories related to medical school that I think could help someone else. I'm definitely open to sharing about those stories. The next question says, how often do you take inspiration from books, shows, and movies that you enjoy when writing your books? This is a very good question. Pretty frequently, I would say. Inspiration, yes, especially when I started writing, when I was trying to figure out who I was as a writer, certain things that I would see in movies or books that I love, Star Wars, Harry Potter, things like that, I would think, oh, that's really cool. Maybe there's something I could do with that, and would kind of try to incorporate it into a story, obviously not like ripping them off, but just like a spin from it. So I definitely do take inspiration from other books, shows, and movies, specifically with authors' writing styles as well. If I find a writing style that I really, really like, I will try to incorporate some of that into my writing style just to improve my writing. This next question says, we are trying to stay positive in these tough times. Can you tell us something positive for you that came out of COVID? Yeah, for sure. So I guess one thing that came positive out of COVID for me was spending more time with my roommates. I was a little worried when we came to Lexington in August that, we're in this apartment all the time. We have class in here, we have extracurricular activities in here on Zoom. And so I was worried. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to be so sick of each other by the time we go home for Christmas. But it's actually been really good. And we've got to spend a lot of good quality time together and just been able to do life together. So I really enjoyed getting to grow closer with them. throughout these tough times. They've definitely been my rock. All right, that is all the questions we have now. Thanks. These were great questions, guys.
Thank you, Lauren. I'd also like to hear about your experience to London. You were a winner at the London Book Festival, and I believe you and your parents or your mother, I believe you've been to London and Hollywood. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, of course. I mentioned it briefly earlier, but didn't go into details on it. My books have won national and global awards, and so I was able to travel to Hollywood twice, actually. So that was really fun. I got to go with my traveling buddies, my Aunt Cindy and my mom, who always make my trips super, super fun. And it was really cool to kind of make a sightseeing trip out of a book award trip. So we would go and we would explore the city, which I had never been to LA before this. So it was really fun to get to explore that city. And then we would go accept the book awards one of the nights. London was particularly really cool. I had been to Europe before, but not specifically London. And it was a pretty short trip. My senior year of high school, it was, I want to say about 4 or 5 days. And so I got to go accept the book award one night. We got to see a few plays. We got to experience all the London sightseeing things, the Eye and the London Tower and everything like that. So it was really, really fun. Definitely very grateful for those experiences that these books have brought me. Good question.
That's wonderful, Lauren. I want to thank you so much for coming onto our Christmas extravaganza. And we do have one more question.
Yeah, perfect. So this question says, did you find it more challenging to write the first book in a series or to write the subsequent novels? Definitely writing the subsequent novels. At the time, I thought writing the first book was difficult because, you know, you're building the world, you're thinking of your characters, you're giving them personality traits and thinking of their backstory. But once you have all that figured out in the first book, then you have to make sure everything in your second book aligns with that first book, which I was surprised by how quickly I forgot some of the little details in my first book. So as I was writing the second and third books, I actually had to go back and reread parts of the first book, parts of the second book to make sure that everything aligned and there wasn't anything askew. Although I'm sure if you read pretty closely, you might find a few things.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren. And I want to thank all the viewers on Facebook and everyone in the Zoom room. You've made this a very special time for us. And I hope that everyone will tune in to the rest of our programming this week for our Meet the Authors Christmas extravaganza. We've had a really good time here on Facebook Live. We also have a YouTube channel we'd love for you to subscribe to, and you can follow Lauren and a lot of our other authors there. So thank you very much. The best of luck with your studies and your current school situation, I feel, for all of the students. I know it's tough, but thank you, Lauren, and we'll see you back here at 5 o'clock today.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.